Thank you, and welcome back to the special meeting for October 19th, 2021. We are on item 4, staff reports, and the first is the 2022 planning project. Mr. Velaniskis.
Thank you, Chair. So in the agenda, Council has the 2021, 2022, and some 2023 planning and building projects. So the list is extensive. You can see on the right side, there's 2 columns indicating whether it's a 2021 or 2022 project. At the bottom of the list are projects that are projected to begin in 2023. So that's where sort of the next planning phase for our work plan begins at the end of 22 projects. And if Council has any questions about any particular project, I'm happy to answer them. We have the budget implications in the 4th column, as well as the comments on where the projects are at today in the 5th column.
Council, are there any questions? Council Anderson, Council Herbert.
Few questions, Mr. Velaniskis. I'll start with one. It's on the first page under Healthy Communities Collaboration Congress. There's reference to the agreement formalizes the relationship between BCH and the district. I wonder whether there is a draft agreement in place already. I note that there is a future community congress that is anticipated in future, but is there a draft agreement at the present time?
Yes, I believe there is. So all of this work was after we've entered into the collaboration agreement with BCH. So the agreement will be a few years old now. I don't have it on hand, but I could provide it to Council after the meeting.
Thank you. That may be of interest. I'll move to my next question, Mr. Velaniskis. Under the second page, terms of reference for shade and view analysis, I wonder whether this project may be coming back to Council once there is a report on the scoping. And I have a particular reason why. It's the geographic scope, if you like. For example, in our small boat harbor, we have viewscapes that are not tall mountains, but immediately adjacent scenic vistas across the channel. That's just an example of the kind of geographic scope that might be of interest. Will there be a report coming back to Council regarding the scope of the shade and view analysis?
Yes, absolutely. So we will, in most of these projects, have kind of a workshop built into it with Council once we get this. We haven't really started the project. We're going to be scoping it out at the end of this year, beginning of next year.
Thank you. On the third page, it's under scoping development permit area form and character review that is slated for or proposed for 2022. And immediately underneath it is a project somewhat related 2023 development permit area form and character review. What I'm particularly interested in is a topic that comes up often with large projects in the downtown area, and that is color schemes in the guidelines for facades. And we have language in the development permit area 3 regarding color schemes. And I suggest that there is community and perhaps Council interest in addressing that or reviewing it at least. I wonder where that would come, that type of guideline review, particular guideline review, where that would come up between these 2 projects, the one scheduled for 2022 and the one for 2023. And the reason I ask is that, you know, the longer we wait, we do have large projects coming through, and there is going to be an end to large projects simply because we're going to be building out. And as we stand up, or if you were to stand up on the top of one of the buildings downtown, it is a striking impression, the palette that is taking shape. And perhaps we might address that question sooner rather than later. So when might that aspect of the DPA 3 come up for review between these 2 projects?
That's a great question for you, Chair. So this is really one project, but we had to split it up in two because it's happening on two different years, and one doesn't require a budget and the other one does. But our intention with the scoping project is to come to council, essentially establish what we need to review in development permit area, the form of character guidelines, and then see what portion of it can be done in-house with staff, and we might do that work in 2022. And then what portion of it, if any, has to go through the budget process for 23. I think we anticipate the colors are going to be part of the discussion in 2022, part of the scope project. And we hear that comment from council. We're going to be trying to address that with current developments as well.
Thank you, Mr. Velaniskis. Chair, I do have an additional comment, but I'm happy to leave it at that for now.
Thank you. Well, maybe hold comments and stick to questions. Councilor Herford. And Councilor Stoner.
Thank you. My question's around the CAC policy and the timing of that work. It would seem just sort of similar to, I suppose, maybe similar to everything on this list. There's a certain urgency to it, and every development that goes through without contemplating our new policies could be considered a missed opportunity. So I'm just curious about, maybe the question is sort of the prioritizing of that and leaving it where it is, which feels to be at the bottom of this list. And I think that, we'll leave what I think about it aside for a second, give you a chance to reply. But just I'm curious why it's sitting where it is on the timeline.
Thank you for that question. Through you, Chair. We recognize definitely that the CC policy review is a priority, similar to kind of everything else on this list. And the reason why it's sitting in 23 is because it does require budget. And we try to prioritize projects that are already in stream for this 2022 budget cycle. So it was really just to kind of keep within our envelope for special projects that it ended up being in 2023. If council decides that this is a priority enough, we are ready to do that work in 22, but it would require budget.
Thank you. And budget and capacity are related issues. Is this, if budget's found for this, we have the capacity to do the work, or is this a lot of, or is it a consultant-driven piece? I'm just not sure the mechanisms to actually accomplish the work. We would have capacity, and we would have to reprioritize something else. But a lot of this will be consultant-driven, and then it would be, between Gary, Buxton, myself, one of the planners, kind of sharing the responsibility on the review process. So, and I guess this may be a process question. Without dictating what the shuffling in priorities is, I suppose we're here today to discuss how we would get these things done. And I'm always hesitant to put a motion, on the fly. Actually, I guess I'm gonna ponder that a bit as we go through the rest of the discussion here. But I'm open to input from my fellow councilors as far as next steps to move that timeline forward, because I feel it's important work.
Thank you. And Mayor Elliott is back, and I'll hand over the chair to her. The remaining speaker on the speakers list at the moment is Councillor Stoner. And then there would be time for comments. There's outstanding comments from Councillor Anderson. Councillor Hooper.
Can I keep you in the chair because I'm having trouble logging in? Thank you.
In that case, Councillor Stoner.
Thank you. Through the chair, it is another question about the CACs. So I guess my question for Mr. Velaniskis would be, do you have a sense of what would be reprioritized at this point, or would you be looking for direction from council?
That's an excellent question. I don't have a specific answer to that. But we always leave a little bit of capacity for things that happen that have to be done every year. You know, there's unexpected issues that come up that we have to deal with. And I think that council prioritized this to probably be able to fit that without having a major impact on another project.
Okay, that's helpful to know. Thank you. My other question, something that's not on the list, and I'm just perhaps not recalling where the conversation ended. Back in 2020, we had a discussion about the downtown parkade. And one piece that emerged from that was increasing the cash and lieu payments. The other part of that discussion was around reviewing permitting or paid parking downtown. And I haven't seen any follow-up to that. And I'm just curious if staff can speak to where that might fall or if they need more specific direction from council to pursue that.
Through you, Chair. So that project is within the engineering department. And that's why you don't see it on the list. And these are all just planning and building projects. I will check in with Mr. Buxton and Dave Narrow to see where the plans are for further work on that.
Thanks. That's everything for me.
Councilor Bettengill.
Thank you. Yeah, a couple of questions. With the short-term rentals, we had a presentation a couple weeks ago, I think, and I wasn't clear from this if our intent is that this will provide sort of an increasing level of enforcement, or it's more to maintain the level of enforcement and so on that we saw.
Through you, Chair. So the budget ask and our work plan essentially anticipates continuing what we're doing now. And we just recently kind of upgraded our capacity with the third-party monitoring provider. And so what we're proposing to do is just maintaining that level of enforcement essentially and regulation for the next year.
Okay, thank you. A couple on the zoning bylaw. If we were interested in bonuses and incentives and sort of regulations similar to residential development, but for commercial and industrial around emissions, is that something that we could consider in phase 4, or that would really require its own phase of zoning bylaw updates?
I think that would be beyond what we plan to do. We could certainly consider it, but the engagement portion of it, as well as really understanding the implications of it, I think would be beyond what we envisioned for 2022 and phase 4. I would suggest that if council wants to do that, 2023 might be a better year for us in terms of capacity. Because it will require engagement. That always takes time.
Okay, thank you. And then also, so phase 4, it's one of the focuses is accessibility. Would that include looking at the ratio of accessible street parking spots and that sort of thing, or does that need to be handled somewhere else?
We handle street parking through our street use bylaws, I believe, and the subdivision development profile. So it wouldn't be something that is in the zoning bylaw. Yeah, the zoning bylaw really deals with on-site, what's happening on private property.
Okay, thanks. And then I guess the last one, one of the things that sparked my memory in the sign bylaw update is a question of whether or not it makes sense to continue with election signs. Is that something that we could consider and kind of reasonably move outside of the scope of this, like before the next election, for example, or is that something that you think would really have to be done as part of that 2023 project?
Through you, Chair. So we have that project right now. It's 2023, and we haven't anticipated doing any work 22. So that would probably require some reprioritization council give us direction.
I'll hand you back the chair. There's nobody on the speakers list at the moment, but Councillor Anderson and possibly Councillor Herkley had comments.
Okay, I've got a few questions. So if there's no other questions. Okay. For the zoning bylaw rewrite, where does preserving solar exposure fit in? And can that fit into phase 3? Because we already saw that a bit downtown where with taller buildings going up and people talking about, well, wait a second, if I want to put in solar panels, how does that work for my house? And I've heard the same thing with some of the residents in Loggers East about, well, I want to keep my single family home, but I know the lot next to me is going to develop. But if I want to put solar panels on my house, how do I make sure that their tall building doesn't shade my house?
Through you, Chair, I think the appropriate place for that would be in the development permit area review guidelines. I haven't seen it directly addressed in a zoning bylaw, so it would be hard to sort of anticipate that. I think it is well suited for the form of character of the BPAs.
They're on here, aren't they?
Yes.
And then just for clarity for the public, maybe someone already asked this. The Garibaldi Estates neighborhood plan goes out to 2026, but the North Crumpet one only is 21, 22. But I think what it's supposed to indicate is that we're doing neighborhood planning, like one neighborhood after another out to 2026. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. The plan is to just continue rolling one after another.
Just following up on one of my colleagues' statements is that we are getting feedback around accessibility, both from seniors and from people with diverse abilities or invisible limitations. And so, you know, we're doing the downtown streetscape. We have this ongoing project around how people are using our public realm. And is there an opportunity to engage more deeply with our seniors and our advocates around accessibility to make sure we're hitting the mark with some of these projects?
Absolutely. I think our main intention with phase 4 is to address accessibility, and as part of that, obviously, there will have to be engagement, and we will be reaching out to anybody we can on that topic. And then also in the downtown streetscape standards project, we're also going to be doing the same essentially for the street portion.
So is our strategic plan goal around neighborhood connectivity and increasing the use? So I know we partnered with our Squamish to do a bit of a survey, but how are we furthering that goal around year-round utilization and increasing access to the public realm? Like, I didn't see it on here. Maybe I missed it, but
I think that there are a number of projects here that are aiming to kind of increase the quality and the quantity of public realm, but it's not specifically called out as a project.
and then on the OCP key performance indicators, one of the things, the work that economic development is doing is around the donut economy, and that's been adopted by the economic leadership team. And so how do we start to, or where do we start to see in these projects that the work in ECDev around a model for sustainability is incorporated into how we're measuring our performance as a district. Is that starting to happen? Or is that something that we haven't contemplated yet?
I don't have an answer for that. We are, at this point, we're supporting the performance monitoring indicators. Is driven by economic development and communication. So it's a collaborative process, and I'm sorry, I just don't have enough details today.
Okay, comments? Councilor Anderson, and Councilor.
Mr. Velaniskis, I'd like to offer a couple of observations regarding the MAST administration item in the present report. Firstly, that it differs in its description from the report on the same project under number 15 in our special operating projects that we'll be discussing later this afternoon. The difference is that the description that'll be before us in the report to be discussed later refers also to a proposed marine project referral body is proposed to inform future land and marine use decisions. So in other words, there is in the special operating project description, it goes into the topic area of focus area 1, governance and shared leadership, whereas the present description and project we're in the report before us now does not. Earlier this year, staff made a decision to reallocate MAST or Marine Action Strategy Administration budget allocation 2021 from more general governance and shared leadership issues to the SPIT Vision Committee, co-chaired by the district and Squamish Nation. That's my understanding. We have not had an opportunity to discuss with staff an implementation strategy for the Marine Action Strategy since July 2019. That's when we had the last presentation where we discussed how are we going to, discuss with staff about focus areas 1, 2, 3, and 4. What are going to be our priorities and what's our work plan? I suggest it would be helpful that the implementation strategy for the Marine Action Strategy and staff's suggestions and work plans were a wee bit more clear and consistent, and perhaps offered again for council discussion. And one of the reasons I suggest this is that since 2019, governance and shared leadership issues have certainly arisen, and in particular in relation to the SERP project, the Central Estuary Restoration Project. Who has a seat at the table? What table is there? And as a response to those issues, we in fact have implemented the SPIT Vision Committee. So my general suggestion is that the implementation strategy for Marine Action Strategy perhaps should be a little bit more clear as to where staff is going, but maybe offer it up for council discussion or exchange of information with council, as we have not had that discussion since July 2019. That's my observation. Thank you.
Councilor Hooper.
I'd like to I have a motion I'd like to test regarding the CAC. Before I do that, I want to see if anyone else has any comment. Make that motion. Is that fairly puts an end to comments? Fair?
Well, people can still comment, but just not on that issue once you put a motion on.
I guess my motion would be that staff bring back a proposed budget and work plan that to council that includes a CAC review in 2022.
Is there a second? Seconded by Council Pettengill. Comments? Go ahead, Council Hooper.
Thank you. And I recognize that all the items on the already included in the budget, not just in this particular portion of the budget, but our budgeting process as a whole, are very important and part of our not only our goals, but sort of our due diligence to do the business in the community. But I do think that any further delay in the community amenity contribution policy review, given the high pace of development, are wasted opportunities. So I think there's a high value and a good return to the community if we assess, if we do this review at our earliest opportunity. And I'd like to create that opportunity so that we don't miss if this is all about opportunity, we're going to capitalize on the opportunity to get what the community needs through these developments that are currently happening and on the near horizon.
Other comments, Councillor Stoner and Councillor Anderson?
Thank you. Through the chair, I'm generally in agreement with my colleague. However, I believe that this may just be better suited for our next conversation around budget, as it is listed as a potential project that council can consider including in the 2022 budget. And I heard from staff that they would be able to fit it in without necessarily reprioritizing any of the other projects. It just needs budget allocation. So that is my hesitancy in supporting this motion, is I think that I've heard from staff that it can be accommodated as long as the budget is allowed for, and that's in consideration in our next discussion.
Councillor Anderson?
Thank you. Similarly to Councillor Stoner, I make the observation that we are going to be addressing this project, community amenity contribution policy review, later this afternoon, and also another. And I would have had the question about the relative priorities between that project and the subdivision development control bylaw update. And I'm hoping that we can also discuss that this afternoon. So I would prefer to see a motion on this item delayed until that discussion of relative priorities.
Given the comments, would you like to withdraw your motion or keep going?
I'll withdraw my motion or postpone my motion till maybe potentially a little bit later. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments on the 2022 work plan? Councillor Pettingill.
I guess just comments. I do think we can't delay dealing with emissions from our commercial and industrial buildings, and so I think that is something that needs to have priority. I don't want to delay our work on accessibility for that. I take the point in the report that this can be part of a smaller zoning phase, the accessibility piece, and so I do think it makes sense to keep that separate and maybe first, but it may not happen in 2022, but I think that should be very clearly on our radars, dealing with those commercial industrial emissions quite quickly. I think the STR piece, I'm a little bit torn. We've got some feedback. The report we got was quite revealing on the level of enforcement that has actually been going on, and I think we're still in the early days, so I'm prepared to keep watching a little bit more, but it is a concern if people are paying the fees and following all the rules, and then others aren't, and so that is something I'm keeping my eye on. The other piece, I'll sort of wait to see if there's other interest from other councillors expressed, but the election sign thing is just something that maybe a bit of a one-off, but something I thought would resonate a lot with the community and people on council, and so I'll just leave that to my colleagues to consider.
Councillor Stoner?
Yeah, I also just want to comment, because I didn't see it on here, and I can't remember if it was on previous versions of this or if we only see it in the strategic plan update, but there's a lot of work going on in planning around affordable housing that wasn't captured on this list, and I just wanted to make sure that the public knows that that's not an oversight, that there's ongoing work happening in that space with the affordable housing organization.
Is there a reason, Mr. Velaniskis, that's not on this list?
I can't hear Mr. Velaniskis if he is speaking.
He's having microphone issues. He can't get it turned on.
It's on now.
Yeah.
So yes, there is, it's because it's not really a special operating project, that's work that's happening every year, continuously. And when there's an actual project, such as a development project that's affordable housing that's led or we're partners in, we also don't capture it on this list because then we treat it as a development project. But there is work ongoing. There's other work ongoing as well, and affordable housing that's not on there.
Thank you. Councilor Rice?
Thank you. I did want to make a comment about the House on Marine reference guide, which is a fairly small sum of money that Mr. Velaniskis' comments just made a minute ago about ongoing work. This is something that at the moment we have about a 5-year budget. This is through the Ocean Watch Action Committee and a subset of the House on Forum, and now part of the Biosphere Reserve Society. And that's for the management and maintenance of the House on Marine reference guide, which is digital, of course, and needs upgrading, needs hosting, and so forth. It's 5 years at the moment, but that's the kind of thing, if that proves to be an effective tool for planning and decision making, which so far it has been, but I think that kind of thing will go on almost indefinitely in the Sound. Perhaps as the reference guide is updated from year to year to keep it current. And so it's the kind of thing that would almost be sort of a business as usual case for our budget purposes. But that's a decision we don't have to make today, but I would just will make that comment that I expect that particular item or something replacing it will probably carry on in the future.
Thank you. Any other comments? I think, Mr. Velaniskis, my one comment is to follow the same idea of budget in this plan and highlight the things that touch on climate mitigation and climate adaptation in the 2022 planning work. Because I think there are things there, but I think we always have to make it self-evident to our community about where that work's going on. Yeah, just trying to find those categories where we're, highlighting some of that affordable housing work if it's not on this list, same with childcare, so that people see their issues a little more clearly. That would be my one suggestion. Otherwise, it's a good plan. Really busy.
Thank you.
All right, so next up, we are moving to the 2022 to 2026 financial plan. This is our first look at special operating projects. And so we'll just take a minute to turn it over to the finance staff. Over to you, Mr. Russell.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of Council. It's nice to be in this room again. although there's more technology than I'm used to maneuvering, so we'll do our best. Okay. I will just say that I've been challenged by these before, so we can gain a lot of experience. And, things will work slightly better. Okay. Today we're going to speak about okay. Wait. Make sure that we get this. Okay, got it. Could we take a slight delay?
Sure, we'll take a 5-minute recess. All right, we're back and we're moving on to our special operating projects in the general fund for the financial plan. Over to you, Mr. Russell.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of council. For the moment, after our technology, we'll continue onward. I say we, I mean, thank you for your patience. This afternoon, financial services wishes to present on behalf. I wish to present financial operating projects. Goal today will be to discuss the special operating project. A number of different presentations have been provided to you within the report. And at the end of all of this, we will be asking for commentary council to the resolution that is contained in the report that you have, which is that these items are accepted including in the 23-26 financial plan. Okay. And with that, we'll get going. All right, I leave it.
CAO Glenda.
Okay, I hope that will improve things. Like that. Okay. So those are our goals. And we want to comment on the key drivers behind the financial plan. So the key drivers behind the financial plan are council's strategic plan. And you'll note that there are the 4 pillars of the strategic plan. In addition to that, there are master plans. There are a number of master plans which impact our financial plan overall. Master plans generally have greater impact on our capital budget than on our special operating projects, but a number of master plans are influenced by special operating projects. And in fact, some of our special operating projects are there to update our master plan. So they do relate to each other. The other item that we would like to say is that we have another grouping of projects, and the grouping is termed organizational plan projects, which is what it shows in your documentation. And the organizational plan projects that have been put forward by staff, they are to provide municipal services. And with respect to ranking those projects and setting priorities, the priorities are related to safety, legislative requirements, and risk. So those are the drivers that staff use in evaluating projects, determining their priorities, what would be included and what would not be included. So that being said, we'll move on. We're going to talk about special operating projects by category. With respect to special operating projects by category, we just outlined the categories: strategic plan, master plan, organizational plan. And as you can see on the screen above, or with respect to attachment 1 in your package, you'll note that we have approximately $235,000 worth of strategic plan projects, $489,000 in master plan projects, and the remainder of the projects are for municipal services, which is approximately $485,000. In total, we have $1.2 million worth of special operating projects recommended for the 2020 fiscal period. I'm going to go back to here for a moment. Would like to comment that the alignment of special operating projects by category, this alignment, strategic plan, master plan, and municipal services, this is the same alignment that council sees when they get their quarterly financial report. So we thought it would be consistent to provide that information from a budgeting perspective. Same alignment would be easier to follow. In addition to that, we presented a grouping of special operating projects by department. And the reason that we present them by department is the department presentation is the presentation which is consistent with the financial plan. So when you look at the formal budget document, the financial plan bylaw, the operating projects and capital projects will follow this line. That is because the strategic plan alignment, which we use internally, has been designed basically to meet this council's needs. And this alignment you see with respect to the financial plan bylaw is created and dictated by provincial government for consistency across the province for municipal reporting. So we've also grouped these into a number of different areas. So first one we're going to touch on is tax funded projects. We wanted to point out one comment in that your report will state that in 2022, the tax funding is $253,500. And on this report, 2022, it shows a total of $340,000. That is because one of these projects, integrated stormwater management plan, is funded in addition to taxes, it's also funded by DCCs and other revenues. So the total funding for this year from taxes is $250,000 from change. We would like to comment that of all of these projects that are on this page, only the key scan upgrade, this listing, the second one from the bottom, is a new project. All of the other projects you see that are funded here by taxation have been funded by taxation in the past, and it is our intent to continue to fund those with taxation. Put that out. We have some projects that are related to the climate emergency that are in our special operating project envelope. And we would like to comment that for 2022 and 26, for this financial plan period, we have added an additional project to the climate emergency grouping, which is the heat pump top-up project. It will be funded from a carbon neutral reserve, approximately $100,000 in there to be spent over the next 3 years. And the idea is that we would use this money to support any other projects or grant funding opportunities that might be available to our households within the district. This would allow people to move from their current heating solutions to ones that were more amenable to climate emergency. We have a number of new projects that have been included in the plan. Would like to point out specifically that if I keep hitting these buttons, I'm going to scroll off to Never Never Land. The first two projects, the pre-designed projects, these these are pre-designed for larger capital projects, which are identified within the capital planning cycle, but that there's a space between the two projects and the timing. So that's why they're showing as operating projects. If the projects continue uninterrupted, then it may be possible to use the funding source identified with the capital project to pay for the pre-design also. But if there's a space between the pre-design and started commencing construction, then they would need to be financed in separate methodology, which is why they're showing up as special operating projects as at the pre-design state. Municipal election occurs every 4 years. So this cycle, it shows on this page twice, 22 and in 26. That is being funded by a cyclical provision in that we put away money every year to pay for the elections every 4 years. The airport safety improvements project is they undertook a number of initiatives in 2021, specifically repaving the runways at the airport. As a result of that, we need to redo the lines as new pavement destroys pavement. So that's basically the simple way to put it. So after a year or so of pavement being new, getting a little weather worn, we will repaint all the lines, and then those lines will stay intact for a much longer period. So obviously, we prefer to have lines on the runways. It is a safety issue. That's why it's there, and that will be paid for out of the airport provision. The one new project that would be tax funded is the P-scan upgrade. And the reason that we are bringing forward the P-scan upgrade at this time, the reason that we are recommending that it's tax funded is, although this facility project is not a standard operating nature facility project or repair project, basically by bringing on the new facilities that we have in the works, the new fire halls, new public works building, we will have outgrown our existing P-scan technology, and it won't work. So we're going to have to replace that technology to allow a single P-scan methodology or technology to be applied to all of our buildings. Otherwise, you're going to have to carry different set of keys, etc. So to get away from that, we have a new building opening next year. Therefore, we need to upgrade that system. So that is the other new project that we brought forward. And we are recommending that this be funded for taxation, since it does support all of the buildings within the municipality. And lastly, the one that exciting one are the projects that, for various reasons, we have left to council to determine their ultimate fate. So the projects for consideration, there are a number of projects there. They have descriptions and justifications within the package. I'm not going to attempt to go through these and describe them in any detail at this point, other than to suggest that clearly we have heard some concerns about some projects already that people may wish to include. So I think that there are a couple of things that I should point out that are of import. One is that the public engagement project is scalable. So the $60,000 that's suggested here is based on a public engagement that was undertaken by the district, I believe in 2018, 17 or 18, around Brenham Park Recreation Center. And that study or public engagement process cost approximately $60,000. So we were using that as an estimate. That one may be much more in depth than what we are envisaging here. And so we're saying it is scalable. We don't have to spend the whole thing. We could develop a program that is smaller and will cost less money. One, two, we know that there is.
Mr. Russell, could you just put the microphone a bit closer to me?
Okay, sorry. The other comment I would like to make is that with respect to the subdivision and redevelopment project, the last one on this list, there is a note in this project in the documentation which explains it. There's been a request for service level change to add new positions in the buildings area and also in the engineering area. And if those service level changes are accepted, this project will be withdrawn because basically what we're saying is we cannot get this work done unless we either have new positions to do the work. And if the new positions are not approved, then to complete this work, we would need to go to consultant and we would create a special project to do so. And so we would have a request for that. Basically, one or the other, please. And then there's a number of other projects which support a variety of areas throughout the organization, from planning through the economic development, and they've been listed here. They are showing as tax supported, and they're showing in 2023. If it is council's desire to have those projects moved forward, then council can direct administration to do so, and we would do so, and we would ask the council to increase taxation to fund the associated project. So at this point, I'm going to go on to my next slide, which says question. I'm going to stop and let you ask whatever you may wish.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. We've got Councillor Race.
Thank you. I'll probably have several, but I'm just going to deal with them kind of one at a time so I can collect my thoughts in between them. The municipal election corporate administration, $90,000, which you mentioned is cyclical. And we put a little bit of money aside for it each year, but it shows it being funded from surplus. And so part of my question is, do we put money aside or do we just go to surplus once every 4 years and take it? The second question related to that was back when we were doing the OCP, which is last term. My recollection is when we were finalizing that in the middle of last term, the comment came out that the OCP notionally should be revisited every 5 years. And there's a cost to doing that. And we would be putting money aside each year to fund an OCP review. And that wouldn't hit us until 2023 or 24, give or take, depending where you start counting from. And I'm just wondering if we are, in fact, putting money aside for that notionally, or if we just have to go to taxation or something in the middle of next term to fund an OCP review.
Through the chair, I apologize for the lack of clarity in our labeling. I defer to my boss, the CFO, so please change that. It refers to accumulated surplus / provisions, and in this instance, the dollars are coming from a provision for the election. So hopefully that's the answer to question one. The answer to question two is yes, within the cyclical provision, we are putting away a certain dollar amount. I don't have that in front of me right now for OCP update. And I believe that's on a 5-year cycle. And I think you are correct that it is anticipated to be updated in 2023. I can look up that number and we can get back to you, but I don't have it.
Thank you. No, the number isn't actually critical. I was just curious that we are following that. Thank you. So I'll step back for a sec and go to something else.
Councillor Henderson.
Thank you. I also have a number of questions, but I'd like to, if I may, start off with questions for our engineering and real estate departments. And I hope they may be available. Otherwise, perhaps we could record the questions for them. First of all, number 12, under Special Operating Projects Multimodal Transportation Plan. The last plan, the first one, was undertaken just 10, 11 years ago, and it had a focus group which met about half a dozen times in this room. And it was a fairly elaborate focus group process, really more of a working group. And my question is whether the budget allocation and work plan is taking into account the concept of striking or appointing a working group or focus group. I do appreciate that the last one was a first off and that the engagement with stakeholders may be different this time around. But is that opportunity accounted for in the budget, a stakeholder mechanism for stakeholder input?
Go ahead, Mr. Wickham.
Yes, through the chair. There is significant budget or a significant portion of that budget is for engagement of various stakeholders at various times through the project. I'm not sure what the exact form of that will be. That'll be part of the design in the early years. I guess it is a multi-year project, early months of the project, in collaboration with the communications department and chosen consultants. So I can't speak to what exact form that would take.
We can't hear Councillor Anderson.
Excuse me. My question is on the same project, Multimodal Transportation Plan. There's reference to CWF, an acronym. Mr. Russell, could you clarify what that refers to?
The acronym CWF refers to Community Works Fund, grant program of the federal government, which wraps up the end.
Thank you for that. My next question concerns the zero waste strategy review. I wondered whether the terms of reference for this review might be coming back to council.
Look at the hands. There we go. Mr. Wickham.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'm not sure at this point. Certainly, we will be working with the CLT and through our regular council process to determine as we finish the scoping of this project at what touch points council will have. I know that zero waste is a very high strategic priority for council, so there will be more opportunity for council to touch on this item than many others.
Thank you, Mr. Wickham. As a follow-up, one of the reasons I'm interested is that zero waste strategy, of course, is diverse in what it may address, not only curbside recycling, but ICI waste streams. And my second follow-up question relates to the next project in the list, landfill expansion, pre-design and permitting. There may be some scenarios for private sector partnerships in addressing ICI waste streams, industrial waste streams. Is this taken into account, or how is it taken into account the role of private sector facilities or partners in the, quote, options for site development, landfill, including waste diversion infrastructure, unquote?
Yes, through the chair, that's an excellent question, and it's something that especially since our last council meeting on this topic, where council expressed great interest in circular economy and using that what we hope will become a large tract of land next to the current landfill, using that land in a phased approach to allow circular economy, allow businesses and partners to work on that land and potentially on adjacent lands. So we've reached out to adjacent landowners, including Squamish Nation, quite recently to start conversations on how we might start that sort of cooperation as early as possible, perhaps even before the brown land changes hands.
Thank you, Mr. Wickham. Chair, I have my next question is for the real estate department, and if we may have a representative here, concerns the item number 9, the real estate and facilities master plan public engagement. This project specifically highlights the Brennan Park Recreation Center and the Squamish Public Library. Both of these projects, as we've discussed them in the past, generally with the public, may include cultural spaces or space uses that are also addressed in the Arts, Cultural and Heritage Strategy. Specifically, Strategy Action Item 6.3 addresses community planning exercises to address what are our needs and who is involved and so forth. The 6.4 action item in the Arts, Cultural and Heritage Strategy involves setting targets for facilities and space solutions. So my question is, are we considering alignment with the Arts, Culture and Heritage Strategy recommendations, action items, in pursuing the Real Estate and Facilities Master Plan public engagement for Brennan Park and a future library?
Mr. Bragg.
Through the chair, good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Yes, Councillor Anderson, we have considered it, in short. It's very early stages of the process here. We know that working groups are part of this, and that comes further down the track. We've already reached out to the Squamish Arts Council and started the process and included that in the municipal hall discussions and the civic block discussions. We've yet to dig into any public engagement process, but we know that is coming. So in short, we're very early stages in the process, and we're acutely aware of the requirements here for the arts, culture and heritage involvement within the Real Estate Facilities Master Plan on all projects.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bragg. Thank you, Chair.
Councilor Pena.
Yes, thank you. A couple questions. The Community Carbon Marketplace Phase 4, and I know we've talked about this a few times, but I can't remember where we left off. And I thought there was some uncertainty still about how or if we could use that and what the accounting was around that. Have we confirmed that we can do the things we wanted to do with that, or are we still investigating?
Through the chair, so this is something we're actively looking into right now. This was a topic we have pushed back. We recognized because of the CCAP and then the MEEP, but we actually have a meeting about this on Thursday. So we are planning on improving the community carbon marketplace and then moving it forward in 2022 and beyond. So it's something we expect to resolve in 2021. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then on the Marine Shoreline Archaeological Review, it speaks to $25,000 requiring a matching grant. The table on page 14 shows 25,000, but I'm not clear if it's 25,000 from taxation and another 25,000 from grants for a total of 50, or is it 12.5 and 12.5 is the project cost?
I'm sorry, through the chair, sorry, Councilor Bennett, the specific project number.
Yes, thank you, 84.
My understanding is the Marine Shoreline, I believe that this is our 25 and that it would be matching a grant for another 25, so the total should be 50.
Okay, thank you. And then I was looking at the numbers for the IDEA project, and I know we had a bit of a discussion on this, but when I look at our aspirations and the budget we are putting towards it, I guess I would appreciate some comments on staff if we are sort of maximizing our opportunity and if we're spending enough to get the maximum opportunity out of this. And in mind in particular is all the efforts we're putting into climate action. And, we don't know what we don't know. And so are we missing a lot of opportunity on the equity front because we're not moving quickly enough or sorry, on the climate front, because we're not, as we address climate change, are we missing opportunity on the equity front because we aren't sort of doing the work we need to do on equity first to make sure that climate piece is addressing that? And so I guess I'd appreciate any comment from staff about how we are making sure that as we address climate and we're putting all those resources and dollars to mitigation and adaptation, that we're really addressing equity issues as well.
Thank you, through the chair. The challenge, of course, is there is a lot of we don't know what we don't know, and it's difficult to budget for unforeseen expenses. That said, we have budgeted to further our work in this area, both through the special project, which, albeit seems small, is what the committee has come up with in terms of a work plan for next year. Additionally, in the service level change with the leadership structure proposal, it includes some administrative staff, which otherwise then frees up a current employee to dedicate more time to working specifically on equity, diversity, and inclusion. Whereas now it's about 25 to 30% of this person's position, it would be freeing her up to focus much more on that. So it's a service level change ask as well as small projects. And as the IDEA committee and the staff member continue to work on this, certainly budget asks will be forthcoming as we have a better understanding of what it will take to continue this work.
Okay, thank you. And one more, if I may. And I maybe should have asked this during the planning piece. So it's hard to figure out where to place my questions in the last two agenda items. But I've heard some questions about wildlife corridors, and I'm sort of assuming that fits probably best as part of an OCP, but maybe some initial work needs to be done. I'm just wondering if staff has any comments about if we were to want to pursue this, where that is best, that sort of thing is best addressed and how.
Through the chair, that's a great question, and it's one of those outstanding items that has been difficult to both scope and to find resources for. We do have we do see it coming up more, and we're seeing it in a neighborhood plan right now that this issue is coming up, and we are beginning to work on it. But this is one of the areas that would be addressed by the service level change for environmental supervisor would allow us the horsepower to kick off a much more comprehensive project.
Mr. Wickham, we lost your last two sentences there.
Oh, sorry. This is this is one of those areas that the service level change for environmental supervisor would allow us the horsepower to scope and run a more fulsome project instead of the more ad hoc approach during development and neighborhood plan reviews.
Mr. Velaniskis?
Just to add to what Mr. Wickham said, I think it's also important to note that it will be very difficult for us to undertake a project of this scope because it goes well beyond our boundaries by ourselves as a district. I think that in my discussions with Mr. Buxton as well, you know, we need the support and participation of other agencies to make sure that whatever plan we come up with is meaningful because you know, the area we're talking about is much larger than the district of Squamish. So we need provincial and likely regional interest to do this.
Do other councilors have questions? Didn't you already have your questions? Oh, I thought you'd already asked some questions. I was seeing if there are any.
I did, and then I stepped back so I could think about my next question.
Okay, I'm just seeing. I haven't asked questions yet. There's a few others. Okay, go ahead, Councilor.
Oh, it just, first of all, and I should have asked it the first time, but schedules all show tax impact on average residential property. And I'm just curious, what is the average residential assessment? So people might know whether they're above or below that line approximately. Do you have a sense of that?
I have a lot of numbers memorized in my brain, locked away somewhere. Unfortunately, I'm not sure the assessment is one of them. I do know that when we talk about this as a percentage, it's based on the average, so it's the municipal component of an average house, and that works out to $2,235. So, you know, if we say it's a 0.1%, if you multiply times 2235, I don't have the actual assessment number in front of me. I have to, but we can.
Just further to that, so I do have that number. It was the average for the single family was 800,000. That's what was used.
Thank you. Second question was with respect to the present special operating projects future, and the last item number, which is number 88, you mentioned that it was either that amount or a possible FTE increase in engineering, if I understood you correctly. And I was just wondering about that increase in engineering staff. Is that already in a budget, operating budget that we've seen, or is that a future decision?
It is in the service level changes that have been presented to council a couple of weeks ago. There were a number of positions that were outlined there. I believe 4 in planning and 4 in buildings and 1 each in engineering and environment. This specific item refers to the position in engineering.
I'll have comments later, maybe, but those are my questions. Thank you.
Sorry, through the chair, if I may add, those positions that were identified in service level change were being funded through a combination of revenues generated from building inspections, engineering servicing agreement, and development fees. So it does not have a tax impact, the additional positions that we were proposing. Okay. Whereas if those positions don't go forward, this is a request to add a special project, which would be tax funded. But the difference basically is the positions, service level change positions that we've identified are being paid for through revenues, and so would not have a tax impact, and this project would have.
Councillor Stoner.
Thank you. Through the chair, just a point of clarification on the heat pump top-up item under the strategic plan projects. It says it's coming from $100,000 of reserve, and I'm just wondering which reserve we're using for that.
I believe it's our climate reserve. Mr. Pickett, do you know?
Through the chair, yes, it's the carbon neutral reserve.
And where does the money for that reserve come from?
That money comes from the CARIP reporting. So its future is uncertain. Thank you.
Got it. Thank you for that clarification. And then I was just curious, Mr. Russell, in the last presentation on the general fund, you mentioned that the overall tax revenue requirement increase is 3.9% for the 2022 budget. And so does that include the numbers that we're seeing here as part of the special operating budget projects?
Through the chair, yes, it does.
Okay.
The $252,500 identified as tax requirement for special operating project is included in the number that we presented previously at 3.9%.
And then the projects for future consideration would just be a simple addition to that overall number. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you. That's it for now. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other councillors in this room with questions? Okay. Through the CAO, for the idea committee, did we, and I can't recall, did we get their work plan?
I'm trying to, I know that Keely did present terms of reference to council. I'd have to go back and remind myself what exactly has been brought forward to council.
Yeah, and the reason for my question is I can't recall because I know we had a conversation about it. But taxing something for $110,000 without knowing a little bit about how it's going to be spent, I think is hard in terms of transparency.
The idea project is 15,000.
Sorry, I was looking at the total column.
So it's a very small amount to kickstart the work of the committee. They're really in a forming the work plan phase right now, and that's why it's a relatively low number.
Yeah. Okay, that makes more sense. When Councilor Pettengill asked the question, I was looking at the other column, like, that gets a lot of money. With regard to the software RFP for fire services, there's a number of grants here that have to do with emergency preparedness and emergency resilience. So is software not covered in one of those?
Through the chair, I don't know that answer specifically unless Ms. Arthurs does or if Chief Stoner is on the line.
No, I haven't even contemplated that. So.
Sorry, I am on the line and I do apologize. I did miss the question, but I would be happy to field it if I can hear that again.
Well, one of the projects on our for consideration list is new software for fire services. And given all the grants that are about community resiliency and preparing for emergencies, I just wondered if any of them cover software. And we've just prioritized other things over this particular project.
Yeah, that's a great question. There are not grants available that I'm aware of that would cover this particular use of software. Yeah. So no, I guess is the answer to your question.
And how is it impacting the work of fire services without this software upgrade?
That's also a great question. Yeah, so I think, okay, the work. What we are seeing is a great deal of redundancy. So just to give you an example, we do manual data entry of all of our calls into our software, which is antiquated and has been recognized as being antiquated for quite some time. So over the course of the summer, there could be 100 calls or 125 calls come in a given month, and that is manually entered into a software system. And we're at the point now where we really can't keep up, and that's not a saying or a term, a phrase, that's we literally can't keep up. There are systems available that would just automatically fill or enter half that data, which would take a huge amount of time off. Our fire inspectors do double entry. They enter their information into a single piece of software that is later entered into another piece of software. And there are obviously software solutions that allow that to happen. And just the information that we're getting because, well, I guess not even that, the report generation capabilities of our current software are unable to give, and I mentioned it's antiquated, a measure like response time. They're unable to generate that report, and the response time is probably the single most recognized measure of fire department effectiveness in North America. And this is having talked to their IT department at the people who own this software and asked for this report, and we still haven't been able to get it. And this is after a number of years. And so there are a number, it's report generation, it's data entry, it's redundancy. And I guess the biggest thing is just entering that data and our ability to keep up when we can't. And so it's either more staff entering or better software.
Thank you, Chief Stoner. And that it's in our budget for 2023 at 19,000. But that's an all-in cost, and there's no ongoing support fees associated with that or license fees.
No, I think to be clear, that is a generating an RFP. So having a professional come in and see exactly what our needs are, and then going to market and then creating the document that we would go to market to for that piece of software. We want to make sure, and I've worked with the IT department on this, just to make sure that we get the right piece of software. Having, I suppose, myself go out to the market and get it, there's a very high chance that I might miss an important interface or an important piece of software, or buy something that's antiquated. So that's what that's for. It's to develop the request for proposal that we would put out to market to make sure that we get the right piece of software.
Thank you, Chief Stoner. So maybe through to IT staff is, why would we not do the RFP in 2022 so that we're ready to purchase software in 2023?
I think this is where it falls on their work program. It is work to develop the RFP, go to market. It's where it's been put on their work plan, and that it's not a surprise to Chief Stoner. That's where it's. We did, I think this year, we did a Band-Aid. Put a Band-Aid on our FDM this year to let us get to this planned work.
But based on what I'm hearing, we wouldn't go to RFP till 2023. And then the earliest we would get software is like 2024. That's a long time, based on what Chief Stoner is saying, is the reality.
I think the timeline was established with input from Chief Stoner.
If I could speak to that too, I think there's a industry development that we have to be aware of and that we probably want to follow and not lead. Our dispatcher, Ecom, is also looking at changing their data management system. And we would want to make sure there would be a great opportunity to fall in step with them and perhaps some significant cost savings. I don't think we want to get ahead of that process. And that's why we have this year buffer in it. Although it is not ideal, we would probably have a better outcome if we found out where they went with their system before we went to market with ours.
And that will happen in 2022?
That will happen, yes, that will happen in 2022.
Ms. Arthurs, then why is this in the category of for consideration?
That's, I think, a Roland question.
They pass the buck to you, Mr. Russell.
I will, through the chair, I will answer that question best I can. When we were going through the prioritization of projects, we determined the level of funding that we considered appropriate, and projects that required tax funding that weren't above that line, let's say, became below that line and therefore were for future consideration. So I think that what it came down to is we were looking at this specific project and other projects in this grouping and trying to determine what the highest priority was. And the software RFP did not outrank other projects that are in this category. And so it did not float to the top and therefore get moved up.
Okay, thank you. The Squamish Youth Council will need a budget each year, and I'm wondering whether that should go here or in operating generally. I'm sorry, could you please repeat the question? I missed that. The Squamish Youth Council meets a budget annually. And so I'm wondering if it should be something that's in special operating projects or whether it should appear in our general fund just because it will be an annual expense, or where would it fit?
Through the chair. My understanding is that there are some dollars allocated to Squamish Youth Council through the Community Enhancement Grant Program, out of that 1%. There are dollars associated.
I meant administrative funds.
Okay,
So
sorry.
for bus passes, for meals, for incentives, for advertising, that sort of thing.
That sort of thing, I think it would be most appropriate for that to be funded through operations rather than through a project. And I think that that probably would be centered in one of the legislative areas, so either legislative services or under council, but one or the other. I think there may be some money within the council budget allocated for that, but I think that I would have to defer to Ms. Pollock to confirm that.
Ms. Arthurs?
There is not money budgeted in that area for the Squamish Youth Council administration for the things that you discussed. So we would need to put in an additional amount of money for that. This is not previously contemplated beyond 2021 for that amount of money.
Okay, Jeremy is working on that budget with me, so we'll speak to you about it when we've got some numbers here. Mr. Picketts, I have a question for you around the community carbon marketplace, and I'm hoping you're there. Yes, there you are. Is this an idea that should be behind us, given where we're at in the climate emergency? Is there a different way we should be engaging businesses now to run towards net zero? I guess, this has been on our to-do list for a number of years, but I wonder if the opportunity and the window of opportunity has passed us by and we should actually do something different.
Through the chair, that is an excellent question. I will try to restrain myself from talking too far out of turn on this. Firstly, I do stand by our decision to certainly prioritize the CCAP and the Municipal Energy and Emissions Plan first. I do think that was wise. So this, in my opinion, this is a lower priority item than the others. I do believe that there is there's definitely some utility and usefulness in it. The way we're thinking about it is it might manifest itself in a slightly different way. We're not sure about this yet, but for example, we might not want to make it as convenient or as much as a kind of first go-to solution to purchase single carbon offsets. However, it is still a really interesting way to promote and local carbon offset projects. So and to keep those as we look towards net zero in 2050 is to really be thoughtful about those. So I guess I agree with you to an extent that it's not our kind of, certainly not a top priority. However, I do personally believe that there is still utility in it, and we are just embarking on more work on this. So we hopefully can provide a more fulsome update soon. Thank you.
I just think probably this is the year to either do it or kill it. So I just hope that informs your decision, your discussions this week. Because if there's a better way to use that budget that furthers our CCAP or our municipal energy and emissions plan, that's a better use of those time and funds for sure.
Thank you. We appreciate that feedback. One thing is that if we do move forward, it will be in we expect it to be in quite a cost-effective manner, so we don't see this being a big budget or money ask. Thank you.
So I guess a question through to planning, and I guess I think I thought I would see something on the special operating projects for the housing governance structure to really put some fuel into this and help get it off the ground. And I know there's a number of things that council is looking at in terms of the CAC policy. We just referred C4 zoning. So if council wants to move forward with CAC, C4, supporting the governance structure so that we have someone focused on those affordable housing aspects, is this an opportunity to add a contract planner for part of this year? How do we get this out from under the busyness of our planning staff and make it a focus to get closer to our goals of 125 units and a governance structure which was delayed by COVID? Is there a way to put a little bit of rocket fuel behind those efforts in 2022? Go ahead, Mr. Velaniskis.
Thank you. I'll try to answer this question, although it's a little bit maybe beyond the planning department itself. I think that if we're talking about a number of projects, and some of these are fairly significant, such as the C4, let's say, review, that will require extensive engagement. And so, it's not going to be just one planner. There may be one planner leading it, but it has impact, a greater impact on, other planning staff, and in some cases other departments as well. It would be possible to expedite maybe some of these projects with additional contract positions where that position would probably take on some of the development review work, and we would assign our current staff to these policy projects, just because it takes a while to ramp up knowledge and experience in the district to be able to hit the ground running for contract planners. So it would be helpful. I'm not sure we'd be able to significantly advance these, just because it still needs support from other departments and the planning department itself.
Councillor Stoner?
Just to build off that and clarify from our previous agenda item, you did mention the CAC policy review could be moved forward to 2022 with limited impact on staff. Is that still correct?
Yep, that's correct. That's definitely, the CAC review we're sort of anticipating. But these other projects, if you start putting it all together, then you definitely have to think about what are the trade-offs.
Thank you. And through the mayor, I also just want to, I believe there was a service level increase proposed in the last budget discussion for the Affordable Housing Society to cover that piece, if I recall correctly, but staff can speak to it.
CEO Glende?
Thank you. Yes, there is a service level increase requested to establish and work on the housing society itself. That said, Mr. Buxton was not here, but is the individual that is primarily leading the affordable housing initiatives. And given his workload, it would be worthwhile having a conversation if there's an appetite from council to look at, as you say, putting some rocket fuel there and adding some capacity. We certainly wouldn't say no to exploring it and bringing it back.
Are there other questions from council at this point? Councilor Anderson.
Thank you. I note item number 84. By the way, Mr. Russell, there is some discrepancy on the numbering. I'm sure that these are just typos, will be straightened out, but I'll just refer to it as number 84, Marine Impact Study. The Marine Action Strategy, to quote the description, has identified 4 priority areas, including development of marine economy. Now, marine economy is focus area 3. Focus area 4 is marine gateway. And that focus area includes addressing issues very much economic development related. So a question is, and perhaps staff might take this as a note for, a hope for on my part, future discussion about the implementation of the Marine Action Strategy. But is focus area 4 marine gateway, economic development and infrastructure and land issues, will that be taken into account? Is it envisioned also to be taken into account in a marine impact study? The description only refers to focus area 3. That is one question concerning that project.
Is there someone that's in it?
Yes, I'm hoping that Ms. Mulligan is on the line, but I'm not 100% sure.
I don't see anyone from Tech Dev.
Very good, Chair. I'll just pass on another question relating to the same one, and that is, I'm interested to know of the geographic scope of the marine impact study, whether it will be limited to the Mamprim Channel, or whether it will take in the entire port area of Squamish from Woodfibre around to Watts Point. And why I raise that is because, depending on the scope, there may be outside funding opportunities from the province or from federal provincial programs that may relate to some of the issues, at least commercial transportation related, in the marine impact study. So I'll leave those 2 questions for staff, maybe next opportunity. I would like to move on to another question, and that is the Marine Shoreline Archaeological Review has already been touched on. I believe it was Councillor Pettingill, and whether there is a grant or tax funding for the 25K. Last presentation on this proposed project, there was reference to a Heritage BC grant, and I would be interested to know if that is still the plan. And my interest is because the district may be competing with local nonprofits for that same funding program. So the issue of where we plan to secure the funds for this project is my question, or need interesting clarification of that. So there are a few groups here that would from time to time apply for that grant, and there are certainly pressing planning interests for heritage. And so the district could end up being competing with local nonprofits.
Who is addressing that one?
I can.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you for that question. I think essentially at this point we're planning to look for any avenues at the provincial level to find the matching grant for that study. Because a lot of this is going to be in, there's going to be some benefits that the province would see from doing an archaeological review study, because a lot of our shoreline is provincial land, and of course anything covered by water is also owned by the province. So I think the answer to your question is we will be looking for any opportunities.
Thank you, Mr. Velaniskis. My next question is returning to the Community Amenity Contribution Policy Review, and it's already been raised by Councillor Herford earlier this afternoon. My question is, another project here for 2022, the CAC review proposed for 2023 currently, but for 2022, a subdivision development control bylaw update. It would strike me that what are the relative priorities? Are there pressing issues for the subdivision and development control bylaw update that would lead staff to propose it for this coming year. In other words, earlier than the CAC review. The relative priority of those two projects. Could you give us some background on, in particular, subdivision development control bylaw?
Is that an engineering response or a planning response?
If I may suggest that perhaps Mr. Wickham can speak to the subdivision control bylaw and I'll speak to the CC.
Sure, through the chair, yeah, it's hard for staff to speak to the relative importance of these two projects that are really have a very different nature to them, and do very different things. As we said earlier in the meeting, if there is a staffing increase, we'll be able to do the subdivision development control bylaw work internally. And it's largely updates that are required, especially, for example, in the stormwater section, we have the new IS&P plans that need to be more fulsomely updated in the project, and more work on water quality as opposed to just handling storm systems. A lot of housekeeping items, improving some design standards, and also just updating to the new MMCD standards. So it's a large spectrum of small but important things, and some strategically important items around stormwater that are necessary to do over the next year or two. It's whether that's more or less important than a CAC update. I think that might be a council decision, and that's why I think it was placed in that listing alongside for council comment. Maybe Mr. Velaniskis can talk more about the CAC policies.
Yeah, I would agree with Mr. Wickham. You know, it's not like we can, if we're not going ahead with a subdivision control bylaw, staff will still have to, like, engineering staff will have to oversee that project. And it's not like we can take those staff resources and say, okay, well, we'll put those resources into the CAC policy, because they're two separate departments, and we can't put planning resources onto an engineering project either. So it's hard to compare the priorities when they're in two separate fields.
Thank you, gentlemen. That's very helpful. I do have another question for planning department, and it is in relation to the steep slope DPA policy work. This has been postponed again to 2023, or is proposed to be postponed. And there's reference to staff capacity issues and competing priorities requiring this delay until 2023. So my question is, why not utilize contract professionals in 2022 as we had proposed or discussed last year? Contract professionals that we might have the private sector, namely the proponent at lot 509, 510, do it at their expense. Could you give some background as to your thinking, Mr. Velaniskis, your staff's consideration regarding the scheduling of this, if there is an opportunity to go to private support funded by the private sector?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. That was originally the plan, is that we were going to largely outsource this project, and it would have minimal impact on staff's capacity. And so the other factor that was affecting the timing of the steep slopes development permit area is the wildfire development permit area. And we used the same approach with the wildfire development permit area, where we've hired somebody, an expert in the field, who was going to deliver us the policy. And what we learned is that through that process, there was a lot of staff involvement necessary because of engagement, and because the hazard the policies tend to have to be tailored to the community and the local context. So I think coming out of that process, you know, about halfway through the wildfire DPA drafting process, our staff have to essentially take over the project from the consultant and run it for the rest of the period. So that is the learning that we are applying to the steep slopes DPA, is that yes, there will be funds required to get some expertise, but that the project will still require significant staff resources. So that's why it's shown up in 23.
Thank you for that background, Mr. Velaniskis. Chair, I have some comments for later, but that's it for my questions.
Councillor Stoner, and then Councillor Race.
Thank you. I just also wanted to get some clarification on the real estate facilities master plan public engagement line item. I think I heard Mr. Russell say that that could be scaled in some ways. So if that could just be repeated in terms of what the options are there, if it's a full 60,000 and that's a take it or leave it line item.
To the chair. I'm looking to see if Ms. Moore might be on the line. If not, I will give you my best understanding. It was anticipated that we would undertake public engagement early in 2022, try to complete a initial project in the first quarter, possibly maybe into April. We want to try to get a sense of the community's interest and allow them to provide some context in which we could then dive further into a more robust public engagement process, perhaps in 2023. We'll note that there's the time space in between that was being contemplated to try to keep this public engagement out of the approaching elections. Okay, so basically what we're saying, we say can it scale? Yes, it can. We could do a portion of this engagement early in 22, and then we will probably pause it and then use that information to redirect and redesign a more robust public engagement process, which would then take place in 2020.
But as shown on the budget, saying all $60,000 is needed in 2022. So would that be different if we were to extend it over that longer time period?
Yes, so I'm just going to add a little slight tweak to what Mr. Russell said. So the first part of it is we will be engaging somebody to help us with exactly what regarding the real estate and facilities master plan we will be engaging with as part of the scoping exercise that Mr. Bragg referred to earlier. We still are sort of questioning what components do we seek engagement on, especially around, you know, the rec center, the library. Will we be seeking input on any of the other public spaces, you know, in municipal hall, that type of thing? So we're going to get some help on putting together what the engagement program is going to look like, and then we are going to utilize that, hopefully the same consultant to help us run the engagement, because we really are up against capacity and communications, as council's well aware, with the amount of engagement that we have on our plate coming our way next year, and with all the big projects going on. And there are some people in the field that do specifically this kind of engagement, and we're hoping to get it done next year. That will inform, if we're successful with our funding opportunities that we know may be happening at the rec center, and also in knowing what the community wants with a library. And it will also involve some engagement with the board as to does community and board needs align. So that's part of that engagement as well. Did that answer your question, or is that a little offside, a little off the left?
So just to clarify, the ambition is to do all of that in 2022 and
That is
not,
the ambition. That is the ambition.
thank you.
Any other questions, Councillor Stoner? All right, Councillor Race.
Thank you. And one of my questions was Councillor Stoner's question, so I don't have to ask that again. But the other thing generally, just taking a step back, and we may have discussed this in an earlier budget discussion, but if we did, I've forgotten the answer. But the special projects this year show about $1.2 million. My recollection is we were proceeding along from year to year at somewhere in the $600,000 to $650,000 range for these. And are we counting them differently now? Is that how we got from that number to this number? Just all of a sudden seemed to be a very large number for special projects. And so, am I missing something there?
Through the chair, to be fair, I'd like to suggest that the dollar amount of special projects proposed in 2022 is significantly lower than previous years. Previous years, we had been running around $2 million a year plus. And in fact, we've asked management to scale back the request. And in addition to that, we moved a number of special operating projects out of the special operating project line and into general operating project, into general operations, I should say. So what we've done is we've stripped out all of the maintenance type projects, the repair type projects, and moved those from special operating projects into operation. So I would suggest that the $1.8 million that we're seeing this year, sorry, $1.2 million that we're seeing this year for general fund is in fact probably lower than it had been historically.
Well, I'll take your word for it. That wasn't my recollection. Actually, somewhere in my plans, we were dealing at a $600,000 number, somehow popped up to this number. But the other question with that is part of it's funded by grants, part of it's funded by taxation, part of it's funded by reserves. And the allocation there, and so for example, we have a bunch of projects who are listed just below the line, which would all be proposed to be funded if they were funded by taxation. Are there other reserves that might apply to any of those? Accumulated surplus is relatively low this year as a source of funding, but I understand the change in designation of that. And so now that might be part of the reserves. I don't want to say they seem arbitrary, whether something is paid by tax or by reserve or whatever, but could staff maybe just sort of give us an oversight of how the funding source is identified, and is there flexibility in the funding sources?
Through the chair, if there's some level of flexibility in funding sources, what we generally ask of management is if they're bringing forward an operating project or a capital project, if they are aware of grant opportunities associated with those projects, we ask that they specifically identify those so that we can include the grant funding opportunity on that line so that it does not by default fall to taxation. So in these instances, generally it's because they've explored other options to fund projects and they've not been able to secure external funding outside of the district. So it by default falls to taxation, it's sort of funding of last resort. So if it can be shown that it would meet the criteria associated with Community Works Fund, for example, carbon neutral, then we would look to those reserves or provisions if that was appropriate to fund projects. But most of the projects you see that are below the line because there are no other external sources of funding.
Just wondering if I could ask Ms. Latimer about the EOC grant application. I think it says for equipment and supplies. So we get a new EOC when the new fire hall is done, but we're not just transferring the equipment we have from the old one to the new one. Just wondering what our intent is there.
Hi, yes, through the mayor. This is actually a recurring grant that's issued annually by UBCM through the Community Emergency Preparedness Fund. So for this year, we're actually spending that money on training for EOC staff. It will be coming up again mid next year, in which case we'll be applying for additional equipment for the new EOC. So we will be transferring some of our equipment across, but some of it is actually quite antiquated. So this will give us the opportunity next year to apply for additional resources and equipment for the new EOC under the forthcoming grant for next year.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify with staff. So one of the things that we're proposing to do in adopting the budget by the end of the year is then have an opportunity to amend it in March once we know the carry forward. And we also know the final non-market change number. So I'm hearing from my colleagues that there may be some projects they want to move above the line. They may also want to move some into the wait and see category. And so I guess as people contemplate whether they're going to move motions in regards to the special operating budget, is there one category or there are two? And I guess I'm asking finance staff the level of clarity you'd like from council as we get to the end of this conversation.
Thank you for that question through the chair. Yeah, so it's council's will, whether or not to move it below or above the line. We can certainly do this now, or council can choose to make a motion below the line. We will ensure that we're listing this and categorizing it and bringing it back to you, so you have that opportunity come the first quarter amendment to then add this project back or remove them when we know the number change. So we can certainly keep a list.
So you'd want to know the ones definitively council wants above the line for 2022, and then there's maybe a wait and see for the first quarter. And then
yes, that's correct.
Council Payne.
Yeah, thanks. Just trying to understand the archaeological study with the marine zoning and the DPA changes. Is there anything in that would allow us to require an archaeological study of a particular property given those zoning changes? And I guess what I'm trying to decide is, do I ask to move that project up, or is this going to be a requirement of specific zonings and specific permits and so on for the next year or two anyways, and so we would capture it by another means?
I could tackle this question. So the answer is yes. If there was an application or some kind of development proposed on a property, and it was in an area that the province identifies as having archaeological significance, then we would be able to request, a site-specific assessment versus doing this greater project, looking at all of the shoreline and identifying, more specific areas where, in the future, if there is development proposed, they will still likely need to do an assessment. It's just we're going to have much better information of where those potential areas are.
And just to follow up, do we know what the province's sort of current designation of archaeologically significant areas are on our marine shoreline? Like, is it most of it or just a little bit of it, or?
I don't have the answer to that question right now, but we could probably find it in short order.
All right, we've been at this for a while, so why don't we take a 10-minute recess? And then we'll come back and finish off. Welcome back to the special business meeting. We are talking about our 2022 to 2026 financial plan, specifically the special operating projects. Just wanted to let council know that we've been joined now by staff from economic development. So if there are questions that you wanted answers to, I believe Ms. Mulligan is here. Go ahead, Councilor Anderson.
Thank you. Ms. Mulligan, with respect to project item 84, Marine Impact Study, there are two questions that occur to me, and they are both related to the potential of bringing in other funding sources. Firstly, the geographic scope of this project. Would it encompass the entire shoreline port, if you like, of within the district of Squamish from Woodfibre right around to Watts Point? And my second question is whether, now the description addresses Focus Area 3, Marine Economy. However, Focus Area 4 addresses quite a number of important economic development considerations, land, marine oriented, waterfront marine. And not only that, but there is an Appendix 2 that was produced as a result of the workshops held in 2016, 2017, which includes input from business stakeholders as to the facilities and needs they identified, not only from the recreation sector, but also from existing and future stakeholders in commercial transportation, for example. So those are my two questions. The geographic scope that staff have in mind for the marine impact study, Malcolm Blanc Channel, or the whole waterfront within the district. And secondly, to what extent we are going to take in that gray area, if you like, in Focus Area 4, Marine Gateway. Thank you.
Thank you through the chair for your question, Councilor Anderson. In terms of geographical scope, we have yet to determine what that scope will be. We'll be working with planning as well as key stakeholders in terms of determining the geographical scope for the study. I will note that we are, as part of the dredge management planning work, completing an economic impact assessment and social and environmental impact assessment as part of that, the dredge management planning. So that will be a component of the full picture around economic impact, and it'll be a consideration as we scope out this larger marine impact study. With respect to your second question, at this point, we are definitely seeking funding to help support a marine impact study, and therefore would consider the future marine needs, including infrastructure and assets, when we are scoping the study.
Thank you, Ms. Mulligan.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions for staff, or staff, perhaps you've got answers that you weren't able to provide before, but maybe have discovered over the recess? Mr. Velaniskis?
Thank you, Mayor. So we did look at the current archaeological mapping data that we have from the province, and it's hard to say, exactly what's the percentage of the shoreline that is covered. It looks like between 20 and 30% maybe. I've also talked to Ms. McJanet, who would be working on that file, and this archaeological assessment of the shoreline, it's unknown whether it's going to increase that area. What it will do is it will identify the areas that may be within already identified areas, which are of higher importance than others. So in the meantime, we would be looking at every development site within this broader area, doing assessments. Once we do the shoreline archaeological assessment, there may be a lesser amount of projects that have to do these assessments because some of these areas have been clarified. On the other hand, the Squamish Nation has identified, that there are maybe some areas that have cultural significance that are not in the provincial mapping. So it's a bit of a mixed bag in terms of the answer. But in terms of what's the percentage covered, I would say it's 20 to 30%.
Thank you. So I guess in practical terms, given where we are with the marine rezoning, is it the case then that some projects would have to worry about the archaeological assessment, other ones wouldn't? Or at this point, sort of everyone's going to have to address that to some degree going forward? Or just where are we today before we do this project, which is now slated for 2023?
So today, what happens if a project comes into the district as an application and it's on the shoreline, it, I think almost all of the time gets referred to the Squamish Nation. And we also look at this provincial mapping to see whether an assessment is warranted. Often the Squamish Nation will come back and say, we want them to do an archaeological assessment. So we sort of use that blended approach where we check in with the Squamish Nation and we also check in with the province.
All right, so Council, I think we should start to bring this conversation to some sort of close, and remembering that you will get to see this all again. So we'll do the capital plan next, but then it all will come back to us before we get to readings. We still need to do our public engagement, so there's time to reflect, but if there are items that you would like to see go below the line, or items you'd like to move above the line, or items you'd like to put on the watch list for consideration once we see the final carry forward and the non-market change in our Q1 update, then you can signal those as well. But if you're going to move something somewhere above or below, you will need to put a motion.
Thank you. I'll move with item number 9, which is the real estate facilities master plan public engagement, be included in the 2022 budget in the amount of $60,000, funded by taxation. I'll speak to it if it's seconded.
Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Anderson. Go ahead.
Thank you. This council will recall came out of the discussion we have around the facilities master plan and budgeting, and with Ms. Moore that set out 2 forms of engagement, one this fall related to budget, and this is not that, and the other in the spring regarding the facilities and what might be included or not, and how they will more or less be envisioned. At that time, I made a comment about this being not only engagement, but also a visioning exercise. I think we're at a critical time, and the reason I'm suggesting that this go into the budget for 2022, as opposed to some later year, we have a number of facilities that we are dealing with right now. We're spending a lot of time on our facilities master plan. Many of them will end up probably in the downtown area. And I think it's important that we have not just a vision for the facility, but a vision for how the facility fits in with other potential public facilities in the public realm in the downtown area, particularly around our major parks, and how they all tie together. This is something that before we go too far with other facilities and new facilities, I think we have to have some kind of certainty around that. And I don't think we can get that unless we do have a public visioning process. And I'm going to suggest that this number is suggested at $60,000, and there's been some question about whether that could be scaled down. And my suggestion would be probably not. I don't think we should count on that unless it was because it was put over more than 1 year. But I think it is important that we start to get an idea of how we want some of these major facilities that are contemplated within the next couple of years to fit in the downtown area, and also individually what they might include. And just as an example, I'm now on the library board, and we had a presentation last year of a facility out in Surrey, which included a library and also a portion of the community center. So there are a number of examples of things like that. There's arts and culture facilities, etc. So I think we have to kind of get a handle on what types of things might be included, how they might be included, and how they fit together to make this a real people place in the downtown core. And so I think we should do that sooner rather than later before we start committing to the final determination of some of these projects. Thank you.
Go ahead, Councilor Anderson.
Thank you. I'm in support of the Councilor Race's resolution for two reasons. I think that we have a bit of a waiting game in the cultural community. We're waiting for them, they're waiting for us. And I do hear that in conversations with stakeholder groups in the cultural sector. But we also need to be prepared. We need to be prepared with cultural facilities or cultural spaces within these facilities that we're talking about, Brennan Park and the library complex, for funding opportunities that may come along. We may not be aware of them just yet. They may pop up and we're unprepared with the space programming work that needs to be done. Space programming shouldn't be done in an ad hoc manner. It needs to consider the bigger and longer term picture of needs and solutions for cultural spaces. Thank you.
Councilor French.
Thanks, Chair. I am speaking in favor of the motion, and I'm speaking in favor at this time. This, even more than visioning for me, is also about transparency and allowing the community a glimpse deeper into the real estate facilities master plan. And I have a concern that if we start adding a bunch of things above the line without taking some things below the line, our magic number of 3.9% could potentially inch up. So at this point, I'm supporting this motion with my eye on the bigger picture as we get towards the end of this budget process. Thank you.
Councilor Stoner.
Thank you. I won't be supporting the motion at this time. While I think it is important to initiate a dialogue with the community around the real estate and facilities master plan, I'm not clear enough on the scope of this work and the timeline of it all fitting into 2022 to justify a $60,000 budget at this point. We have broken out our neighborhood planning processes into 2-year processes at $30,000 each. And I'm not saying that we need to delay this for longer. I do think that the engagement piece is important, and but I think that we're hitting the transparency piece on the real estate facility master plan through our updated budget process. And we know that there are some real financial considerations in terms of how we ground that visioning process for the remainder of the real estate and facility master plan pieces. And so I'm not entirely sure we need to put a full $60,000 into the budget for 2022 to enable that.
Councilor Pangio, Councilor Hubbard.
Yeah, I'm prepared to support this at this point in time in the budget process. I may change my mind later. I think it is important to have more of a discussion about the real estate facilities master plan. I'm not sure how clued in people are towards it. One of my hesitations though is, in my experience, these discussions have been presented more as a, what's your sort of wish list? And we talk about different ideas and visions and so on, which is okay to a point, but I think the reality that we're in is we have some very difficult decisions to make and challenges, and we're trying to work through that. And I think to my mind, the important piece of this discussion is bringing the community into that understanding of the trade-offs and the reasons and benefits a little bit more than a wish list type visioning thing. And so for me, it's also what does this engagement look like? But for now, I'm prepared to entertain this. Thank you.
Thank you. I see the importance of the of public engagement at sort of every step of the work that we do here as a council to make sure for a number of reasons. Transparency is one of my favorite ones, and the real estate facilities master plan is, as we've already set in motion, the replacement of some of our key sort of the highest priority facilities will impact on our borrowing capacity and will affect taxation. So I do think that public engagement is important. As I look at this overall list, however, this to me, this isn't the first piece to move around. It's I'll be so I'm at this step. I'll support moving it above so we can look at the implications and we can discuss what may need to come out. As there's another item I would like to move up the line here as well. So I'll support this at this point, recognizing there's a few more steps in the budget process where I may be forced to change my mind on that particular topic. But I'll support it for now.
I won't be supporting this. I don't think the description or scope makes sense to me at this time. I think the 3 projects we identified in our strategic plan will be achieved in 2022. We have 2 major neighborhood plans going on. We have other huge priorities. The housing governance structure will initiate, which I think will necessitate some community dialogue. And budgeting's hard. There's other priority projects that I see below the line that are far more critical to achieving better outcomes on childcare and affordable housing. And there's good data from the engagement we did with the whole community around Burton Park several years ago. The library is welcome to have its own engagement process funded through their budget, but I don't see this as a priority. You know, when I look at when these 2 facilities will be addressed in the real estate facilities master plan, it's not 2023 unless we get a grant, and then that's already scoped out in terms of the improvements that we'll make around the change room, the energy efficiency, all that sort of stuff. And the engagement a few years ago told us the priority was the wellness center, expanding capacity around space and gyms and multi-use rooms before we look at the rink and the pool. And so when I look at the other item people want to move forward that I think has a far greater impact, I don't see this as a priority for 2022. We'll call the question. Any opposed? Mayor Elliott, Councillor Stoner opposed. Motion carries. Councillor Hurford, were you going to put forward a motion around the CACs?
Thank you. I'd like to move the community amenity contribution policy review, or item 3, for $40,000 removed above the line for into 2022. I'll speak to it.
Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Pettengill. Go ahead, Councillor Hurford.
Thank you. It's been council's identified that our current community amenity contribution is getting the community amenities that we would like at this time, and highlighted that a review is necessary. So the $40,000 spend here, or 0.12% of taxation, or on average $2.79 per housing, I think is a very reasonable spend to positively impact affordable housing and childcare. Both of these items are in a crisis point in our community, and as we delay this work, opportunity to positively impact that is slipping away and doesn't come back until the lifespan of the development, which is well over all of our horizons for the moment, as far as I'm aware. So I think the time to take action on this is now, and arguably could have been sometime in the past. So I think we are in a position where we, with this spend, we can take action on this and start positively impacting these crisis situations as fast as possible, which would be the responsible thing to do.
I don't see any other hands. Council French?
This is another one I'll support under the same thought as the previous one. That magic number of 3.9% will go up unless we bump some things down. And in this particular case, I see this as a solid investment in the future, and I completely agree with Councillor Herford that the sooner we are in a position to increase what we're receiving from developers, the better for the community as a whole. Thank you. Yeah, I will be supporting this. In the last item, the mayor's point gave me some greater hesitation than I initially had on the last item, but I feel a little bit more comfortable with this one. To be honest, I had sort of understood somehow that this is something we were dealing with this quarter. And so I was a bit surprised to see it in 2023. I may not fully understand the scope in my mind, just the portion of affordable units, that sort of thing, that we've seen the impact, we've been working with it. It's not clear to me why we need a significant budget to make those sorts of adjustments. And I was hoping we could make those kinds of adjustments sooner rather than later. So to keep the discussion going in support of the general principle, I will be supporting this motion.
Thank you. I'll call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Let's put forward a motion that staff consider what additional resources may be required to smooth and accelerate the implementation of our affordable housing. Both our governance body as well as our next supportive housing project. Seconded by Councilor Herford. Thanks. And I'll just speak to this. This has been a priority of ours. The governance structure was slowed down because we wanted to engage our not-for-profit community and that are involved in housing. And obviously COVID struck right as we did that. And they were very, very much preoccupied with taking care of our more vulnerable citizens. So, so I recognize that we're behind, but this is a problem that won't get better, and it's been nobly spearheaded by our GM, but that is a busy person, and I'd like to see if we can put some dedicated resources there for our final year in office, and really get this to where, try and catch up a little bit and get it to where we all hoped it would be before the end of our term. Councilor Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor Elliott. I will also support this this resolution. I think that, or I've noted that when we bring it up, or staff brings this forward for consideration or in a way of reports on the Squamish Housing Organization Initiative, the emphasis is on portfolio management and on the resources that we need for it to launch it. I would suggest that we should also be mindful that there are other stakeholders, those who are our partners at present in the affordable housing cause, would be prepared to engage now in strategic planning for the next project, strategic planning for new types of partnerships. Be on the lookout for that. They have that capacity and interest. Affordable Housing Options Group, which started in 2010 nearby there, produced a report in 2014 that addressed a Squamish housing organization. And the emphasis was not only on potential portfolio management and property management, like the Worcester Housing Authority does, but on advocacy. And right now, I think we could use that voice set up, and would not going to be a big budget to do affordable housing advocacy. And those are our other partners in the field. Do it now, but I think that there could be a new platform that we don't need to wait for. And there are potential partnerships and community conversations that are being delayed without that platform in place. That's my feeling. Thank you.
Any other comments on this one? I'll call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Councilor Pettengill and then Councilor Stone.
Is it too late for a question?
No, there's no motion on the floor.
Okay. So I believe we had a discussion a little while ago talking about adding into our emergency declaration more almost sliding scale targets so they remain consistent with the IPCC. And I guess I'm wondering where that stands. And the reason I'm thinking about that is when I look at the IPCC and what we've seen over the last year or two, we know the targets are much higher now. And so I mentioned commercial and industrial targets and those sorts of things. So I guess what I'm trying to figure out is where's the starting point and how are we making sure that we're addressing these things, the changing need to address climate change more aggressively? Where's the starting point and how do we make that flow through? Because I guess I'd like to possibly put forward a motion, but I'm not sure exactly what to target at this point. And maybe staff is already working on the first steps that will get us these answers.
Through the chair, I can take a first crack at this. So we understand that we need to amend the OCP to include the IPCC targets. However, an OCP amendment is quite an onerous task. So our plan is to add that to an ongoing amendment, and our plan is to work to incorporate this into the next amendment. So that's hopefully going to come about in the next 6 months, but we thought it would be much more efficient use of staff time to put two of those together. Thank you.
Councilor Stoner?
Yeah, I'll start with a question. I'm just curious, the cash in lieu of parking that we receive when there's parking variances, what reserve does that go into?
Through the chair. To answer your question, excuse me, Councilor Stoner, we have two reserves. The first reserve is the off-street parking reserve, which one I think is where the money would go. But in addition to that, council also has the opportunity to move dollars into the alternative transportation reserve. So it is at council's discretion where the dollars be allocated. Planning would, through their development permit process, work with the developer to determine what the CAC contribution was for off-street parking, or in lieu of parking, I should say. And then it would be up to council to determine whether the amount went into the off-street parking reserve or whether the amount went into the alternate transportation reserve.
And my follow-up question to that is, would staff feel like that is an appropriate, that we could use those reserve funds for the parking or for the parking study and scoping project? Or is that a decision of council?
Yes, staff would consider that to be an appropriate place to draw those funds from, pending a decision to.
In that we have to check to make sure that it doesn't have to be spent on actual projects and could be spent on policy. And the money that so every time there's a development permit that comes forward with the cash in lieu amount, council votes on where to put that money in, whether it's the active transportation or the other reserve. I think that the active transportation portion likely wouldn't be eligible for this spending, so it would have to be the other alternatives to parking reserve.
Councillor Stoner, did you want to make a motion?
Yeah, so I'd like to move that staff bring back an option for funding line item 82, parking utilization study and paid parking scoping through the reserve created from cash in lieu for parking.
Is there someone like to second that? Seconded by Councillor Anderson. Any comments? Councillor Hurd? Councillor Stoner and then Councillor Hurd.
Thank you. I do want to see this work move forward. I do think it is important. It's more so from my perspective, the scoping of the paid parking component for the downtown area. And I think that using the cash in lieu funds that we have received is a good use of those dollars for this type of work in order to try and find a functional solution as we continue to build out downtown for both residential parking as well as visitor parking and hopefully alternative forms of transportation. We did also increase the cash in lieu for parking this year, and so there is more dollars coming into that reserve, and so I think we should use them in order to at least get that scoping done for what paid parking downtown will look like.
Go ahead, Councillor Hurd.
Thank you. If I could ask a question to staff at this point, just for clarity on the balance of the account that or of the reserve that we're looking to pull from for this project.
That's the information Councillor Stoner's motion is asking them to bring back, is whether we can do it from a policy perspective and whether we actually have money in that. So it's not to approve it, it's for staff to go and do their homework and bring it back.
I was just curious in the contents of the fund, not the framework around it. Either way, I'm supportive of this direction. I was just curious how much of you're considering spending, but that'll come back to us. So I'll support it this time. I think it's an important step. And there's lots of talk in the community about the availability of parking when they move around the community to do their daily business. And I think that that the availability of parking spots is important, and I would expect that this work could improve that. So I'll support this too.
Councillor Anderson and Councillor Pettingill.
Thank you. Yes, I'll support this resolution to have staff come back to us with some further perspectives and information. I also wish to note that we discussed the downtown parkade study on March 17th, 2020, and a resolution was passed by council to provide direction to staff regarding the cash and lieu fee strategy as follows. Staff, and I'm just excerpting here, staff to explore paid parking in the downtown with a goal of transportation demand management for consideration in the 2021 budget. So I am concerned about the delay of 2 years in exploring paid parking. So I support this resolution. Have staff come back for another conversation about it. Parking concerns downtown from diverse backgrounds, including the general public, but diverse stakeholders won't go away. We have a letter, in fact, on this evening's agenda for action requests and correspondence concerning downtown parking issues for the disabled, but it's part of the general picture down there, that issue. So I'll support the resolution. Thank you.
Thanks. And it's a question of clarification from the mover. And Councillor Anderson got at a little bit. My recollection from previous discussions is that we'd often refer to parking demand management as opposed to just paid parking. And so I'm wondering if the mover is intending paid parking specifically or parking demand management in general as part of this.
I was just referring to the line item as it's written. I would suspect staff would include that in the scoping of the study.
Okay. Happy for staff to bring this back if we can, but the other piece of it, it's not just about the money being not coming from taxation, but also whether there's capacity for staff to oversee this project in 2022. So I'd like to understand that portion of it as well, given that we've already put two other things above the line. So it's all a big picture. I'll call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Russell, given that there's differing opinions on some of these items that have been put above the line, I wonder in future reports if you could just highlight them as things that were moved above the line or for discussion. So I don't know, put them in green or purple or some color, just so that councillors that may wish to pull them below the line later or do whatever can see them clearly in the budgets going forward.
We will solicit council's choice of color and act accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you. Council, any other last questions or comments? Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor Elliott. I'd like to make a brief comment concerning the project description for item number 15, the Marine Action Strategy Administration. It's just a simple one, but it comes up again and again with the project description for this and my, I'll read it out. There's reference to a marine project referral body and to an overall review of estuary restoration, habitat banking, conservation priorities, and blue carbon opportunities. My concern is that this is too limited. If we're talking about marine action strategy, estuary management, waterfront management, we must be disciplined and be seen to be disciplined that we're about integrated resource management. Part of the picture is recreation, tourism, commercial transportation, water-dependent industries, and we must plan them all together. So I'm concerned that there's narrow reference or too narrow reference which sends the wrong signals here exclusively on conservation. That's not, we cannot achieve conservation without achieving all the rest of it together. So in our project description for marine action strategy or estuary planning, we have to be thinking integrated resource management, and this description, in my view, falls short on that. Second comment I wish to make or observation concerns 83, core enabling and emerging sector development. And this, I don't really have a recommendation concerning this. This is a proposal. The project outlines spending $40,000 in 2023, $30,000 the following year. I think, first of all, that we have two categories here, core and enabling sectors and emerging sectors. And we need to keep them both in balance as regards our attention. This project description really only refers to two emerging sectors, green economy and outdoor recreation. The other ones are transportation, tourism, and forestry. Those are the core and enabling. So we need a balanced attention to these, and council is part of that, as staff have in the past pointed out, that the opportunity is ours to make this suggestion. There is a specific, I'll just quote here, specifically in 2023, economic development proposes a special focus on workforce development. I would suggest we need to be mindful, and we may be, as in ongoing economic development department activities, be concerned about land and space requirements. And these are especially important for the core and enabling sectors, those three I mentioned. We have persistent issues with medium industrial lands. Where are they? How can we use them? And where's the next bank of medium industrial lands? This is an integrated issue involving 3 or 4 departments. It was highlighted in 2015, our issue with medium industrial land. We've had 3 land studies produced and presented to council since that time in 2020 and 2021, but they only address solutions and information for medium industrial in a fairly limited way. They're not focused on medium industrial. And I just spoke with a company yesterday wanting to expand 4-fold and looking for medium industrial land and facing a host of issues, and some of them visited quite recently by council in discussing business park and BCR yards and so on. So I'm concerned that, or I'm interested to see continued ongoing attention to land, whether there's a project next year on workforce development, great. But I'd like to see some balanced attention to the core and enabling sectors, as well as the emerging ones. So this is just a general observation rather than a recommendation regarding this line item in the budget. Thank you.
I just will remind council you might want to break before the evening meeting. Councilor Pettengill?
Hopefully this will be reasonably quick. Councilor Anderson made mention of blue carbon in the marine action strategy, and I missed that. Blue hydrogen is just hydrogen created from fracked gas, and I would say not consistent with our green tech aspirations. I'm wondering, is that sort of what blue carbon is, or is blue carbon something different?
Mr. Pickett.
Sure. Blue carbon just refers to CO2 that's sequestered in a natural ecosystem that's below water. So it'd be probably refers to eelgrass or kelp or something like that. Thank you.
Thanks, that's helpful. I think I like blue carbon better than blue hydrogen. My other, I guess it's maybe more of a comment. You know, at some of the rallies and discussions over the last couple of years, it's become how clear some of the inequities in our systems are really presenting existential challenges for parts of our community. And I really appreciate and I see the efforts of our staff and understand the desire to proceed cautiously and meaningfully. But I guess I'm not comfortable we're putting enough attention when I look at our dollars into this topic. I think I struggle to put forward an appropriate resolution at this point. So I guess my leanings, pending other advice, is to maybe follow up with Ms. Glenday just to sort of understand what sort of resolution I might put forward. I don't want to just sort of say spend more money blindly, but you know, I think some people are really struggling, and it's just not clear to me we're addressing that adequately. So I'll maybe come back the next meeting with them.
Thanks, Councilor Pettengill. And remember too that the diversity, equity, inclusion motion was about moving this thinking through the organization, rather than it being someone's project to deliver. So it's there. I know Mr. Pickett is thinking about it from a CCAP perspective. I know that the IDEA committee will be thinking about how we move it into the organization so that it is part of the projects that are coming forward. And of course, the engagement we're doing is now taking that into account. So just want to make sure that you have that context as you're thinking about it. All right. That was fun. I love budget. So thank you very much, staff. I think you have all the direction you were after. I'm seeing nods, so that's good. All right, so motion to terminate. Moved by Councillor Race, seconded by Councillor French. It's a total shutout. Sorry, Councillor Herford. Just trying to, you know, keep your ego in check there. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, everyone. See you at 6.